Hi boys and girls, this is Miss Simpson here. Welcome back to another one of our videos where we are going to continue with our read-along series for the book The BFG by Roald Dahl. I hope you've been joining us for our past few videos where we've started reading the book, kind of talked about the characters a little bit, and thought about how we could describe our new character, the BFG. So to start us off, we're going to do a quick recap of what's happened so far in our book, and then we're going to keep on reading. We're going to jump right in, see how much more we can get done today. So what happened so far, we know that we have a character, Sophie, and she's an orphan. And we know that she was looking out one night, which she wasn't supposed to be doing, and she saw this big figure. And then he snatched her from her bed and carried her to Giant Island. And from there, he showed her the different giants. He talked about himself, and he introduced himself as the big, friendly giant. So now we know what the BFG stands for. So when we left last, we decided to think about how you would describe the BFG. So that's kind of where we're going to be starting off today. What do you think about how you would describe? What's he like? And today, hopefully, we're going to learn a little bit more about what he's like. So we're going to jump right in, and we're going to continue with our next chapter, which is called The Marvelous Ears. Back in the cave, the big friendly giant sat Sophie down once again at the enormous table. "Is you quite snugly in there in your nightie?" he asked. "You isn't friggy cold?" "I'm fine," Sophie said. "I cannot help thinking," said the BFG, "about your poor mother and father. By now they must be jipping and scumping all over the house, shouting, 'Hello, hello, where's Sophie gone?'" "I don't have a mother and father," Sophie said. "They both died when I was a baby." "Oh, you poor little scrumpet," cried the BFG. "Is you's not missing them real bad?" "Not really," Sophie said, "because I never knew them." "You's making me sad," said the BFG, rubbing his eyes. "Don't be sad," Sophie said. "No one is going to be worrying too much about me. The place you took me from was the village orphanage. We are all orphans in there." "You is an orphan?" "Yeah." "How many is in there?" 10 of us," Sophie said, "all little girls." "Was you happy there?" the BFG asked. "I hated it," Sophie said. "The woman who ran it was called Mrs. Clunkers, and if she caught you breaking any of the rules, like getting out of bed at night or not folding up your clothes, you got punished." "How is you getting punished?" "She locked us in a dark cellar for a day and a night without anything to eat or drink." "That rotten old rot's wrapper," cried the BFG. "It was horrid," Sophie said. "We used to dread it. There were even rats down there. We could hear them creeping about." "The filthy old fizzwiggler," shouted the BFG. "That is the horridest thing I is hearing for years. You is making me sadder than ever." All at once, a huge tear that would have filled a bucket rolled down the side of the BFG's cheek and fell with a splash on the floor. It made quite a puddle. Sophie watched with astonishment. "What a strange and moody creature this is," she thought. "One moment he was telling me that my head is full of squashed flies, and then the next moment he's telling me that his heart is melting because of Miss Clunkers locking us up in a cellar." "The thing that worries me," Sophie said, "is having to stay in this dreadful place for the rest of my life. The orphanage would have been pretty awful, but I wouldn't have been there forever, you know, would I?" "All this is my fault," said the BFG. "I is the one who kid-snatched you." Yet another enormous tear welled from his eye and splashed on the floor. "Now I come to think of it," Sophie said, "I won't actually be here that long." "I is afraid you will," said the BFG. "No, I won't," Sophie said. Those brutes out there are bound to catch me sooner or later and have me for tea. I is never letting that happen, the BFG said, and for a few minutes the cave was silent. Then Sophie said, "May I ask you a question?" The BFG wipes his tears from his eyes with the back of his hand and gave Sophie a long and thoughtful stare. "Shoot away," he said. "Would you please tell me what you were doing in our village last night? Why were you poking that long trumpet thing into the Gucci children's bedroom and then blowing through it?" cried the BFG, sitting up suddenly in his chair. "Now we is getting nosier than a Parker." "And that suitcase you were carrying," Sophie said. "What on earth was all that about?" The BFG stared suspiciously at the small girl sitting cross-legged at the table. "You is asking me a whoopsie big secret," he said. "Secrets that nobody is ever hearing before." "I won't tell a soul," Sophie said. "I swear it. How could I anyways? I'm stuck here for the rest of my life." "You could be telling other giants." "No, I couldn't," Sophie said. "You told me that they would eat me up the moment they saw me." "And so they would," said the BFG. "You is a human being, and human beings is like straw bunkles and cream to those giants. If they're going to eat me the moment they see me, then I wouldn't have time to tell them anything, now would I?" "You wouldn't," said the BFG. "Then why did you say I might?" "Because I is brimful of buzzburgers," the BFG said. "If you listen to everything I am saying, you will be getting an earache." "Please tell me what you were doing in our village," Sophie said. "I promise you can trust me." "Would you teach me how to make an elephant?" the BFG asked. "What do you mean?" Sophie said. "I would dearly love to have an elephant to ride on," the BFG said dreamily. "I would love so much to have a jumbly big elephant and go riding through the green forests picking peachy fruits off the trees all day long. This is a sizzling hot muck-frumping country we is living in. Nothing grows in it except snozcumbers. I would love to go somewhere else and pick peachy fruits in the early morning from the back of an elephant." Sophie was quite moved by this curious statement. "Perhaps one day we'll get you an elephant," she said, "and peachy fruits as well. Now tell me what you were doing in our village." "If you's really wanting to know what I'm doing in your village," the BFG said, "I's is blowing the dreams into the bedroom of those children." "Blowing a dream?" Sophie said. "What do you mean?" "I's is a dream-blowing giant," the BFG said. "When all the other giants are out galloping off every night in which way to swallop all up human beings, I is scuttling away to other places to blow dreams into the bedrooms of sleeping children. Nice dreams, lovely golden dreams. Dreams that is giving a dreamers a happy time." "Now hang on a minute," Sophie said. "Where do you get all these dreams?" "I collect them," said the BFG, waving an arm towards the rows and rows of bottles on the shelves. "I has billions of them." "You can't collect a dream," Sophie said. "A dream isn't something you can hold onto." "Yous is never gonna understand about that," the BFG said. "And that is why I is not wishing to tell you." "Oh, please tell me," Sophie said. "I will understand. Go on, tell me how you collect dreams. Tell me everything." The BFG settled himself comfortably and then crossed his legs. "Dreams," he said, "is very mysterious things. They is floating around the air like little wispy misty bubbles. All the time they is searching for sleepy people. Can you see them? Sophie asked. Never at first. Then how do you catch them if you can't see them? Ha ha ha, said the BFG. Now we's is getting on to the dark and dusky secrets. I won't tell a soul. Oz is trusting you, the BFG said. He closed his eyes and sat quite still for a moment. A dream, he said, as it goes whistling through the night air, is making a tiny little buzzing, humming noise. But this little buzzy hum is so silvery soft, it is impossible for you human beings to be hearing it. Can you hear it? Sophie asked. The BFG pointed to his enormous truck-willed ears, which he now began to move in and out. He performed this exercise proudly, with a little proud smile on his face. Is you seeing these? How could I miss 'em? Sophie said. They may be looking a bit preposterous to you, the BFG said, but you must believe me when I say these is very extra usual ears indeed. They is not to be coughed at. I'm quite sure they're not, Sophie said. They is allowing me to hear absolutely every single twiddly little thing. You mean you can hear things that I can't? Sophie said. You is a deaf as a dumpling compared to me, cried the BFG. You is only hearing those thumping loud noises with those little earwigs of yours. But I am hearing all the secret whisperings of the world. Such as what? Sophie asked. In your country, he said, I is hearing the footsteps of a ladybird as she goes walking across a leaf. Honestly? Sophie said, beginning to be impressed. What's more, I is hearing those footsteps very loud, the BFG said. When a ladybird is walking across a leaf, I is hearing her feet going clumpity, 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 clump, like giant's footsteps. Good gracious me, Sophie said. What else can you hear? I is hearing little ants chittering to each other as they scuttle around the soil. You mean you hear ants talking? Every single word, said the BFG. Although I is not exactly understanding their language. Go on, Sophie said. Sometimes on a very clear night, said the BFG, and if I is swiggling my ears in the right direction, and here he swiveled his great ears upwards so they were facing the ceiling, and if I is swiggling them like this, I sometimes hear in far away music coming from the stars in the sky. A queer little shiver passed through Sophie's body. She sat very quiet, waiting for more. My ears is what told me yous was watching me out of your window last night, the BFG said. But I didn't make a sound, Sophie said. I's was hearing your heart beating across the road, the BFG said, loud as a drum. Go on, Sophie said, please. I can hear plants and trees. Do they talk? Sophie asked. They's is not exactly talking, the BFG said, but they's is making noises. For instance, if I come along and I's is picking a lovely flower, if I is twisting the stem of the flower till it breaks, then the plant is screaming. I can hear it screaming and screaming very clear. You don't mean it, Sophie cried. How awful! It is screaming just like you would be screaming if someone was twisting your arm right off. Is that really true? Sophie asked. You thinks I's is swiggle-figgling you? It is rather hard to believe. Then I's is stopping right there, said the BFG sharply. I is not wishing to be called a fibster. Oh no, I'm not calling you anything. Sophie looked right back at him, her face open to this. I believe you, she said softly. She had offended him. She could see that. I wouldn't ever be fibbing to you, he said. I know you wouldn't, Sophie said, but you must understand that this isn't easy to believe such amazing things straight away. I understand that, the BFG said. So please do forgive me and go on, she said. He waited a while longer, and then he said, It is the same with the trees as it is the flowers. If I is chopping an axe to a trunk inside of the heart of a tree, I hears this terrible sound. What sort of sound? Sophie said. A soft moaning sound, said the BFG. It is like the sound of an old man is making when he is dying slowly, very slowly. Then he paused, and the cave was silent. Trees is living and growing just like you and me, he said. They is alive. So is plants. He was sitting very straight in his chair now, and his hands were clasped tightly together in front of him. His face was bright, and his eyes were round and bright as two stars. Such wonderful and terrible sounds I is hearing, he said. Some of them you would never wish to be hearing yourself, but some is like glorious music. He seems almost to be transfigured by the excitement of his thoughts. His face was beautiful in its blaze of emotions. Tell me some more about them, Sophie said quietly. You ought to be hearing the little miceies talking, he said. Little miceies is always talking to each other, and I is hearing them loud as my own voice. What do they say? Sophie asked. Only the miceies know that. Spiders is also talking a great deal. You might not be thinking it, but spiders is the most tremendous natterboxes. And when they's is spinning their webs, they's is singing the whole time. They's is singing sweeter than a nightingale. Who else do you hear? Sophie asked. One of the biggest chat bags is the caterpillars, the BFG said. What do they say? They's is arguing all the time about who's the prettiest butterfly. All they's is ever talking about who's the prettiest butterfly. Is there a dream floating around here right now? Sophie asked. The BFG moved his great ears this way and that way, listening intently. He shook his head. There is no dreams in here, he said, except in the bottles. I has a special place to go for catching dreams. They is not often come into giant country. How do you catch them? The same way yous is catching butterflies, the BFG answered. With a net. He stood up and crossed over to the corner of the cave where a pole was leaning against the wall. The pole was about 30 feet long, and there was a net at the end of it. Here is the dream catcher, he said, grasping the pole in one hand. Every morning, I is going out and snitching new dreams to put in my bottles. And suddenly, he seemed to lose interest in the conversation. I is getting hungry, he said. It's time for eats. And that is the end of the chapter called The Marvelous Ears. So we are going to stop there with our story for today. And I've got an exciting prompt for you for writing today. At least I'm excited about it. So your task for today is to describe what it would be like if you had giant ears and you could hear all the little sounds that are going on. What would you do with that power? What would it be like for you? What would you want to listen to if you had giant flapping ears that could hear everything? What would you want to do with them? So I look forward to seeing your responses and wondering what you would do with giant ears. What would you want to listen to? I hope you enjoyed our story for today, and I hope that you also join us next time as we continue reading the BFG by Roald Dahl. Have a great day.